Every day is a training day. The critical nature of aviation safety requires a commitment from all of us to commit to effective training and learning, especially when new technologies coming on board and new entrants are making our jobs more complex. So with that, I'm going to have my co-moderator join me on stage for the next panel to have the discussion around air traffic control training. I'm pleased to have him join me from the right here. He is FAA's Deputy COO of the Air Traffic Organization, Mr. Tim Arel.
Good morning, everyone. The goal of our panel discussion this morning is to speak with both national and local leadership about what it takes to start our training initiatives, how we go about it, the challenges that we face in executing it, and whether or not it's effective. The most important aspect being, are we making a difference in improving the delivery of safe air traffic control services to the flying public? Specifically today, we'll be discussing recurrent training and monthly safety discussions, as well as the on-the-job training initiative and changes to our national training order, the 3120.4.
So with that, we're going to bring some experts onto stage to be our panelists. If you could hold your applause till they're all seated, that would work well for us. The first is Mr. Tom Adcock, NATCA's National Training Representative. Behind him, Jeffrey Vincent, VP Air Traffic Services, ATO. And then Glen Martin, Vice President, Safety and Technical Training, ATO. Don Moran, National Supcom Chair. Brian Shallenberger, the FAC Rep at Washington Center. And Carl Adams, the manager, Air Traffic Manager from Washington Center. Thank you. So before we start the discussion, we're going to start off the panel with a video.
The data-driven approach mentioned in the video is very similar to the evidence-based training that we developed collaboratively several years ago and still use to this day. Our first question is for Tom and Glen, and we'd like for you to explain how each of the subjects are identified for our training initiatives and how relevant they are to the data that's presented, both through ATSAP and other NAS data elements.
Okay. So we have 6-month development cycles, so about 8 months out before the delivery point for the next round of recurrent training. We solicit information from the various lines of business in the ATO. We solicit for data from ATSAP, from the ERCs, and from the analysts. And then we all get together about a month. In fact, we just finished the meeting last week for the next round that'll be delivered in April. And we take a look at that data and we try to identify some of the things that have the highest risk, that we're seeing increase in trends that we want to try to feel like that's an appropriate thing to be addressed. Then we divide it up and look at what is the best method of delivery for that particular type of topic. And then we make a final decision. So for instance, what you're going to be seeing in the next round of recurrent training, based on decisions we made back in March, is going to be a module, both in web-based and ILT, on following up from this conference is why training matters. VIP movements, team resource management, and altitude compliance are some of the ones that we're going to be covering for the October round.
Thanks, Tom. And I would just add the importance of what you do every day is what's driving a lot of this. If you ever wondered where your ATSAP reports are going, where your MORs, EORs are going, that's a big source of where this data comes from. So it's important. Everybody's reporting every day. Everybody takes a moment to share their thoughts and their perspectives on this to help us pull that data together when we're trying to put this program together. There are some issues, as you can see, that really are shared across the country, and it's important that we get your input into that process, as well as you taking the time to sit down, understand these subjects, and talk about them at your facility. That's what's important to us, is that each facility take the time to discuss these subjects because there's obviously something going on or the data wouldn't be pointing us in those directions.
Excellent point. And so from a facilities perspective, our next question is for Don, Brian, and Carl. How is this training received when it's delivered to the facility? Does the workforce understand the risk that's driving these subjects, and are they effective?
I would say that the training is received very well. Every recurrent training I've been to has been successful, even in my smaller facility of Austin. I think it's important to see a supervisor up there and a rep up there, a representative from NATCA up there. It shows that we're working together. We all have the same common goal, and that the discussions that happen during those recurrent training sessions are very valuable for the facility and very localized.
I agree. Even if the subject may not be totally relevant to my facility and alone, it's the discussions that happen during recurrent training that make up for anything else. There's things that come up during recurrent training that we actually have to go and research and make sure that's we're doing things by the book in the way that we should. But just having those discussions to me is the biggest part of recurrent training.
And for me, to look at it a little more systemic, understanding the why we're delivering what we're delivering is crucial. Ensuring that the instructors that are delivering it are delivering the message behind the material. Also, when you know what the subject matter is, to discuss it ahead of time with your counterpart, and to make sure you're on the same page with how you're going to deliver it and the message that you want delivered.
Yeah. And for the second part of that question, is it effective? I think it's very effective. Just from listening to the discussions, and I've seen some aha moments in some of those recurrent training sessions where someone said, that's actually how I'm supposed to be doing that, and it was his peers that helped him out with that, that kind of thing. So I think it is very effective. I think they do take it very seriously. It's not just a check in the box kind of exercise. There's always room for improvement, and I think that together we should always try and make those sessions better. Even with the safe briefings, there's definitely room for improvement in those monthly safe briefings that come out.
And just to add on to that, I know the latest big thing that we had was the IFR VFR. We had huge discussions in our building about IFR VFR separation and the problems that we've had with it in the past. So that was a very great topic, that's been in the discussion for many, many years.
So on yesterday's panel, when we were talking about weather, Aaron Phelps out of Minneapolis Center talked about shifting that culture and ensuring that people are embracing the training and ready to receive it. So there's always going to be those people in the facility that would rather take a break than take the training, or they don't understand really why they need it because they're certified. What can we do to shift that culture, other than what we're trying to do here, hoping that our leadership in the room goes back to their facility and talks in a positive way about training? What else could we be doing to shift that to a more positive embracing of the training?
So I think a culture shift is it's a very difficult task. I mean, sometimes it takes a while, sometimes and a lot of times we try to do something different or do something better, or when all we really have to do is stay the course. All we have to do is keep driving, keep working together, keep spreading the right message, and that safety is important, training is important. We need to train every day. Our job is training. That's what we do, and we keep people safe. That's our job. So if we keep pushing that message, eventually everyone's going to get on board that ship.
Planning is crucial, in my opinion. Having that interest-based communication, having those hard discussions, having those ahead of time. If you know you're going to run into certain roadblocks along the way, have a joint effort in how you're going to navigate those.
And just like you said, the leadership has to be on board. I don't know anything else besides safety and training That's where, if you're going to try to start collaborating, that's where you start, because
Yes.
you have so many points that you're aligned together with on safety and training. The two biggest things. I think, some of the feedback that I've gotten over the years is maybe a little bit more tailored towards the different services like en route, terminal. But maybe that a little bit more tailored, and that would maybe get a little bit more participation in people, being in.
And Tom, do we have good avenues for feedback to get back to the developers of recurrent training to improve? And how does that work?
So that works like in this round, there'll be a URL associated with the thing where we take the feedback. Richard and Jamal have taken that feedback both for web-based and instructor-led, and they use those comments and feedback that you provide after you've completed recurrent training to improve it for the next round. So I encourage you, when you take it this next time, take the time. There's a real small URL associated with one of the last modules that you'll take in instructor-led training. And we love the feedback. We love the feedback.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, because it affects your ability to do the SAFE discussions, the monthly SAFE discussions, recurrent training, developmental training, CPCIT training, and that's staffing. I mean, we got the question here already. We got it yesterday. It was punted to this committee. What about staffing? How are we going to do all of that with a limited amount of resources in the facility?
Listen, at Washington Center, and I know the en route centers for the most part have more staff and contractors and everything else. We still had staffing challenges. We were at 232 CPCs at one time, 72-point-some% onboard staffing with 125 developmentals. It was a challenge, but myself and Carl both worked together. We did a lot of things to reduce the class time, the throughput, getting more people through the process and stuff, shorten it up. Same thing with recurrent training stuff. It's our priority. It is our priority. Maybe we try to pick some times that are a little bit different or outside the box during the year of doing recurrent training, a little bit slower period of year and stuff. A good example is we're doing CPDLC also. We're doing it in the evening, and we're going to continue with our training classes during the day. There's so many things and options that you can look at, and we have these discussions all the time.
And it has to include all parties. It can't just be me and Brian having that discussion. We bring in our reps, we bring in our Supcom leads, our management leads, and have those discussions as to how we're going to overcome this challenge. Recently we delivered refresher training and simulation in July and August. We didn't want to do it then. We didn't have it scheduled then, obviously. But we were able to pull that off in 15 working days. We trained the entire facility. And it's a matter of having the collaborative discussion, having those hard discussions, and making it a priority, committing to one another, committing to the facility for the task at hand. It's amazing what you can do when you have all parties involved.
Yeah,
I wanted to ask Jeffrey, you've led both the training organization, safety and training, identifying all these issues and building it, and obviously leading the air traffic service unit. You're the one communicating expectations to the field and seeing how effective it is. So how do you balance, what are your expectations to the management team of these facilities?
Well, the first thing was when we were looking at OJT training throughout the country, we realized that we certainly had some challenges and some struggles there. Instead of making some decisions in the vacuum of what we thought those numbers should look like, I think we took a very collaborative approach to that, where I probably, if I would have had my way, would probably have rolled those things out probably in 2 to 3 months. We took a very measured process. It was about 8 months working together. And so the training initiative hours that you see are a culmination of NATCA and the agency working together to come up with those numbers. And those numbers took into account all of the things that are listed there. When you talk about the recurrent training, all the other different challenges in the building, that's why you see the 12 to 15 hours for people that have to maintain currency. That's taken into account that you have to do recurrent training, you have other training that has to get done in the building. All your training time is not going to be spent doing OJTI. And for the people who are not certified, the 15 to 18 hours is still getting your recurrent training done, but having a little bit more time to concentrate on the OJTI. So we tried to strike that balance, and we know that every facility is going to be different, and we know there's going to be some impediments to being able to even meet those numbers out there. So we're certainly going to give you an opportunity to explain what those impediments are, and maybe we can better refine that.
So, I mean, what about the critic that says, we don't have enough people, we can't train, so we're going to use trainees to supplement staffing to avoid the payment of overtime? Are we actually going to support facilities and the focus on training with resources around overtime, OJTI classes, maybe more simulation?
So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have an unlimited supply of money. There is not an unlimited supply of money, but my philosophy is, and I've certainly discussed this with my bosses, Terry and Tim, we're not going to stop training simply to avoid paying overtime. Being able to keep someone training pays better dividends for us in the long run. And I give you a prime example of something that I think was very successful in one of our facilities. We had a recent 804 consolidation in Boston. I think when the facility consolidated, they had over 90 trainees. In less than 2 years, they've got that down to 22. Now, they overspent their overtime budget by $1 million this year, but I think it was money well spent. You know, those are the types of situations where the training was getting done. It was worth spending the overtime money for.
So let's talk about the initiative again a little bit more for the facility level. I know you guys talked about recurrent training, safe discussions. What kind of challenges are you seeing in the facilities with regard to meeting those guidelines? Is there an understanding of why we have this focus?
Again, it's the leadership in your building, and I think explaining to your members of your workforce, you know, why this came out and why we're doing this. And again, me and Carl, I mean, I think, you know, like I said, training and safety to us are easy subjects and easy things to tackle in a building. I've done more briefings with Carl in the short time he's been my ATM than I've done probably in the last 5 or 6 years to the workforce. And just explaining why we're doing this and why that was set out and everything. To us, it was, you know, it was something that we could strive for to reach. We've still not reached our goals, you know, that we're trying to get to. But, you know, I know we had a couple weeks where we trained 70 people during that week time frame. So, you know, we are getting it done. We're moving closer to getting to the goals. And, you know, I think every facility should try to achieve those.
And there are some cultural challenges that are associated with any time we get that kind of direction from outside the building, from headquarters. It's explaining the why we're doing it, not just because they said so, but this makes sense based on the hand we're dealt, the challenges that we have staffing-wise, training-wise. So, you know, it helps you in the long run understand, and also explaining what the goal is and where we're going to be the better for it. It's a lot easier to get buy-in based on a collaborative decision at headquarters than it is any time trying to just come up with something on your own. We have been fortunate enough, we've exceeded our CPCs from 18 to 19 by 10 CPCs already, and we're projected to have another 8 to 10 more before the year is out. So we're doing a great job training. Are we meeting the ATO guideline? No, we're not, to be completely honest with you. But that doesn't mean we're not looking at other ways to attack that increase and also taking that into consideration when we bargain for next year. So there's a lot of things, and that's really just starting training earlier and making training last longer in the evening. Things of that nature. But nothing is off the table, especially with training and safety. It's been very easy for us. Safety, our local safety council is ridiculously good. They handle a lot of things, and they also blend a lot into the training realm. So, you know, it really takes a full team effort to overcome all of these challenges that we have. But there's nothing more important than what we're doing now to make it better for everybody next year.
And one of the things that I look at is the resources are in my building. That's the people. The people, the resources are in my building. Now it's getting them trained. That's always been the hardest over the years, is actually like getting the people into the building. But they're there. And, you know, like I said, that to me is 3/4 of the battle, is getting the people in your building. And, you know, we can work on striving to make the training and everything else better.
And it's great that you say that. Looking at some of those numbers have certainly started to move. So we see the needle moving. We know we're not at the goal, but we've already seen a 25% increase in the training. I think probably one of the most important things that I would hope that everybody sees is what's happening with this initiative is the number of trainees that we have in the system. And it's a big number right now. It's almost at 4,000. But what that 4,000 represents is that there are 82 facilities out there right now that have the opportunity to be staffed to 100%. And that projected, when you're projected to be at 100%, that takes into account the attrition. That takes into account training failures. That takes into account people moving on to other facilities or people retiring. 82 facilities. That's a lot. We haven't had that opportunity in a long time, and and I just hope that we seize that opportunity and don't let that opportunity slip by. In the past, we've had challenges with hiring. We talked about the staffing issue. Every facility now that is below the national average has bodies. We have bodies there for you, and just what you were saying about the bodies and the resources are in your building now.
So it's still, the challenge is there. I don't think anybody is going to pretend that this is not a difficult thing to deal with, because it is. It's challenging on how to train as many people as we have in a lot of our buildings. And thank you for doing the hiring, as we have pushed that for many years. But now we got to get them trained. So what are we expecting from our managers and our reps, our leadership, our frontline managers as well? What are we expecting from them? I mean, they're smart people, right? So they should be able to embrace the initiative. But what do you expect them to do? Because I know we get some malicious compliance on let's just sit them down there and train them and check the box, or let's cancel leave on everybody so we can get training done. What are your expectations?
And that's not my expectations. And we have heard some of that. You're right. We know that there's malicious compliance out there. Nobody gets spot leave until the training goals are met for the day. My expectation is that the FAC rep and the ATM are going to set that message from day one. And that needs to go all the way down through the operations managers, all the way down to the OSs and the area reps. And they need to have those conversations. I don't want to date myself, but when we was coming through the system, you used to see the operations suit. They would sit there and they would have a conversation with your shift rep, and they would talk about what needs to be accomplished for the day and what the goals are. That's my expectation. My expectation is that those conversations will happen every shift. You're looking at how many people you need training. You know the importance of training in your facility. And yes, people have things to do. People do need time off from work. You have to look at that. You have to take that into account. You need to have those conversations at the beginning of every shift. And my expectation is that the ATM and the FAC rep is setting that expectation in the facility, and the OSs and the shift reps are having those conversations every single shift.
So I got one more question similar to the recurrent training thing. Is there a way for our super motivated leadership teams at facilities that are figuring this out and making adjustments to accomplish this initiative, is there a way to get that best practices up to us so we can share that with other facilities?
So we're certainly asking for feedback. We have put together a joint training team. I think on our side, we have, on the management side, there's Peter, Abby, and Teresa. I think there's Nick Daniels and Jamal is leading from the other side. That feedback comes to us, and we sit down, we let them make those decisions. I don't want to make those decisions from sitting there at headquarters. My counterpart, I work with Dean, we talk about this, but we want that team to make those decisions. So that feedback, if something's not working, that feedback needs to come back through that team. That team's empowered to make the adjustments that they need to make. For me, I think the biggest thing right now is to make sure that I get the tools and equipment in the people's hands to be able to do the things that they need to do.
We have another question along the same lines. Are we concerned with balancing quality of training with quantity of training as it relates to the National Training Initiative? If so, what are we doing to address it? So, Don, I wanted to ask you, what are supervisors doing? Is Supcom spreading the message about this or providing support and stressing the importance of what both Brian and Carl articulated, which is it's a local conversation that has to happen about how we prioritize our training? How's that message going out, and what do supervisors say?
Absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that supervisors are the ones that are having to track all this training and make sure that the trainees get all the training that they're required, and it is a challenge out there. We're doing the best we can do to support those supervisors out in the field. We've already provided them with a tool to help them track this training time, and also it allows them to denote why there was no training done, whether the person was off work or doing simulation or anything like that. We're also collecting best practices from the field. We've done some telecons with all the managers, and we're taking surveys, just like they said, and getting feedback from the supervisors in the field, finding out those best practices. And in November, we're going to be having some communication to the supervisors out there to help some of those facilities. Maybe someone's challenge that they fixed in this facility will help this other facility with a similar challenge. So we're doing a lot to support them in that. I think at first, you know, like with every kind of change, everyone was like, "Whoa, what are we going to do? You know, this is too much. How are we going to do this?" But now that we've settled in for a couple of months now, everyone's on board. We're seeing change already. We're seeing positive change already, and you know, we're excited.
So are we messaging the importance of the local conversation, or that conversation on the shift about what the goals are and what's achievable, and how we can tweak the training to make sure that we're getting the best of our time?
Absolutely, that's very important to us, that that local conversation is happening between the supervisor and the shift rep, or whoever, you know, is representing the controllers at that time. Absolutely.
Great.
I would just add to that, Tim, that when people are getting a very steady and a consistent level of training, the quality of that goes through the roof. Training someone 1 hour or a couple of days a week is poor quality of training. So even though the duration may lessen because you've trained them steadily, you're getting them a much higher quality of instruction by giving them the amount of time each day that they can get in, so that they're getting that each and every day, that reinforcement. This job's just simply too hard to have people just touch it every once in a while. It takes a lot of training to get these folks up to the level of our certified controllers, and they need that steady training every day if we can get it to them.
Yeah, I know when we started looking at that, I guess it was 9 months ago, that we had facilities that were, I mean, such a low training time, and the time to certification was so lengthy. And I'm going, there's no way you can certify someone with just getting an hour or two a day. It's that repetition that we talk about, getting that reps in a position, working the traffic. That's the key to getting the certification. So, yeah, and I think the other one that's been hit on here over and over again between everybody on this panel, the key is the communication. Mm-hmm. Making sure that the facility leadership is getting together, having those discussions. Certainly there's some challenges associated with the OJTI initiative, but it's nothing that you can't work through together. And on the other side of this, your facility is going to be in much better shape. Just like Jeffrey said, you got 82 facilities that have the opportunity to be at 100%.
Trish, some of the things that we've done, you know, outside of everything else, was we just, you know, finished up our schedule MOU and working on our annual leave MOU. Listen, taking away leave or whatever it was never part of the discussion that we had because of the training thing. But making developmental schedules more aligned to where their trainers are, where the traffic is. I remember a couple months ago I came in on a Saturday night in my area to work, and I had a lot of people there, developmentals on a Saturday night. I said, why are all these developmentals here on a Saturday night when there's no training, you know, no traffic and no staffing to train them? So we're working on that to make their schedules more aligned to where the traffic is, you know, where the trainers are. You know, we don't want to use partially qualified controllers to staff unless we absolutely have to, which does happen sometimes. But their main focus and goal is going to be training. You know,
we all have our role, and their role is to be plugged in and training. The whole quantity-quality discussion, we have 108 people still in training even after making 24 CPCs this year. And we've yet to have that problem where quality versus quantity has become an issue. We have had the discussions about what do we do if it becomes an issue. Okay, so just to have those hard to have discussions, what if discussions, if we get here and this individual, you know, maybe hit the target hours, and what do we do then, right? Because maybe it's the initiative that forced the individual to get to the goal. The reality of it is the point forward tells you how, you know, we speak to those target numbers every year. We evaluate them, we adjust them. So staying plugged in is the key.
I think, you know, when you look at the number of trainees that we've got in the system right now, you know, you're hard pressed to think that there's not some trainee that could use that level of traffic that's taking place. So you know, I know there's going to come times where you'll have 4 or 5 people that maybe get bottlenecked on a position. But when you have the large number of people in training that we have right now, there's just about someone in that building that can use that level of traffic. So it won't become the quantity over quality.
Speaking of quality, looks like one of the main questions right now is, if excellence is the norm, how do we reconcile making 70% the standard to pass classroom and simulation training? And I know Tom and Glenn, there was a lot of debate about this. I know we've made some recent changes. Certainly we all had opinions on the subject. If you could elaborate what went into that decision, what our goal was, and how we go forward from here.
So we put the collaborative work group together it's been about 2 years ago, and that was one of the first things they looked at. The discussion was all centered around the one and done philosophy that we currently have in the .4. We had in the .4 until recently. And we're looking to prepare someone to receive OJT when we send them back for simulation. We're not trying to make a CPC out of someone back in the lab. That's not what that's for. It's to get them prepared to receive OJT, so when you get that developmental out or CPCT out on the floor, that they're ready to start the training. We're not making CPCs back in the lab, as my friend Jimmy Lake is so fond of saying. So that was the thought in changing the simulation requirements so that everybody has an opportunity. We use a cumulative grading model now, as opposed to, you take it, you fail it, and you have one opportunity and you're done. Now we have a cumulative model over the course of several problems. And in the scheme of things, there is still, we haven't lowered the standard. We haven't changed the standard on what we're doing. We still expect someone to perform back in the lab. So I think there's been no change in that. The same thing applies on the floor. There's nothing that we're changing on the floor in the new order. Our expectation is that when you show up on the floor, that you are able, in order to get certified, you have to meet the requirements on the -25 and the facility OJTI checklist. That's the bottom line.
I would just add to that, Tim, that the previous standard was somewhat unfair. Unfortunately, as much as we want to believe we're perfect, we're not. And it is a chance to recognize that we put each of us through a rigorous in hiring and employment and training. When they get to OJT, they are showing an aptitude for the job. Many people that come through may or may not certify at the facility their first place, but with the NEST process and so forth, most people hired and get through the screen stay in the air traffic business. That means they've shown the aptitude to do this job at some level. And we need to be focused on giving them our knowledge and our time to develop them to the level that we're working at. And that's what our focus needs to be. Our job isn't to weed them out. Our job is to share our knowledge and our skills so that these folks have the best opportunity to succeed. And let the process run. We've done a tremendous amount of work on the Point 4, on the training review process. We have a training review going out to almost 28 facilities to get better data, to continue to train better. The system is working. You are working hard. We're trying to support you with that, with these things. But the bottom line is our people, and we need to take care of them, and we need to keep focused on getting them to be successful and not worrying about one mistake causing them a career change.
So we talked about resources with training specifically over time. Let's talk about technology that can help us with training. Simulation is a big, an opportunity that some facilities have to help supplement the training. Can we talk a little bit more about whether we have adequate sims available for training across the country? Is there opportunities to go to Oklahoma City to get supplemental training with sims? And then the iPad rollout. Can we talk a little bit about the iPads that rolled out to the facilities to help with training? Where are we at with that?
So I'll jump right in.
Jumping in?
Not looking at
I'll
me.
dive right into that. Certainly looking at the simulation is something we just started to talk about. I think the level of training that we're undertaking right now is probably This is the most we've seen probably since the mid-'80s of the level that we're training, the number of people we're trying to train at one time. That's big for me, is to make sure technology has really changed of how we train people. Walking around with the big bulky binders and things like that are a thing of the past. And I got to commend Glen and his team. The rollout of the iPads was just a great idea. We had a little bumps in the road, but I think we are working on those. We heard the feedback. There were some issues I know we had in the field with accessing some of the content with Huddle or whatever. Glen's team and Tom have done a great job in getting those corrected for us. And I think even with some of the needs of getting out to Oklahoma City, they just did something with doing some recurrent, refresher training for us. They built some classes for us in Oklahoma City for one of our facilities because the large number of developmentals that they had, they weren't able to do that training in the building. And also, when we first rolled out TSS, I remember probably 10 years ago, the goal was to have one TSS in every district. With 4,000 trainees in the system right now, that might not be enough. And I'll let Glen talk about some of the new sims that they've got out there to kind of help us with that.
As far as the academy, I think there is certainly room for improvement as far as what they can provide. I think we need to take a look at that. You're familiar with the Tetra course. I know we were very eager to talk about expanding that. Most of the folks that have been involved with that, talking a lot with the instructors at the academy, they'd see that as a very good step for folks going to our 10, 11, and 12 terminal radar facilities. So we're talking about expanding that and making sure that we give people everything that they can get before they get to the facility, bringing them in at a little different level. There is some training that you get through your basics course on the en route side. We're modularizing that so that it can be available to folks at the centers. When you cross option from terminal to en route, you usually don't go back through the academy. So we're actually developing what they learn at the academy to give to the facilities so that folks don't miss that piece of the training. So I think that will help cross option folks. Moving on to the iPads, I think the important thing for me is to recognize that we believe that training is very individual, and the more we can bring to the individual to help them prepare themselves as they move through the training course, that's the key to our future in training. So the iPads are a very important program. We're highly encouraging you to embrace this. We know that there are some Wi-Fi problems. Has been a slow ramp up to get everything up and functioning, but we really are counting on this being a service delivery method for the developmentals as they come to your facility. We've begun to start working toward getting them handed out at the academy on their first day. So the academy will be handing them out for us, but we're continuing to upgrade the products. We expect to have quite a suite of products over the course of even the next year for them, so that when they feel they need something or they get some feedback from one of you as their instructor, they can go on these iPads and take some courses and take some training to improve on that skill set. So we're moving very quickly on this, but I think we're doing a little bit of a catch-up, but I'm hoping we're almost there with the iPads.
So I think we're headed in the right direction with the iPads. There's no question. We're continuing. I know we're working on a keyboarding app to practice stars and ERAM entries. So there's all kinds of things that we're adding to those that are going to enrich the opportunity for learning on those. Aside from the ability to push the updates for any new changes in procedures and orders, you always have that up-to-date information for training when you pick that iPad up. First time it's back in the facility, the iPad update gets pushed, and all the information in there is up to date. I'd kind of like to go back to that simulation part for a second, if that's okay. I think one of the problems with simulation, it's not so much in the large facilities, but in the mid to lower level facilities, I think we have an underutilization of the existing capabilities they have in their facilities. We have some smaller or mid-grade level up-downs that are using 1 to 2 simulation problems. So part of the thing with the new order that's coming out, we're going to have a minimum requirement for that that's going to make it so that based on your facility type, there is a minimum and a maximum number to make sure that we're meeting the needs of developmentals as they come into the facility.
While you're on that, can you just cover the point for highlight the changes real quickly and the status of the rollout?
I'll give you the 2-minute version. So first off, the work group did a great job. It's what we've been talking about. Training is a team sport. So literally from the facility manager and the facility representative all the way down to the training team, we have everybody working together as a team. So starting with the roles and responsibilities with the ATM, FAC rep, and the training administrator, those all have been aligned so that those individuals are working together. In Chapter 4, really quickly, we talked about it yesterday with the panel that was up here that Steve and I moderated, which was how do we help individuals who may need some refreshing on certain things. We have now divided skill enhancement training into 2 types, skill improvement training and skill deficiency training. And the first one is designed specifically, it's like batting practice. It's something that you've already learned how to do, but you have the opportunity to go back and practice it if you make the request. In Chapter 6, really quick, just the OJTI selection process, and that panel is really clearly defined. The training review board piece is very clearly defined now. We have that, I think that's probably more questions that I get asked, and I'm sure Abby gets asked, is around training review boards. And the other piece is the recertifications that due to loss of currency. That was in the old order is kind of not clear. So in the new version, it is absolutely crystal clear. It just really spells it out almost line by line. And then, like we talked about in the appendices, we've set requirements, minimum and max requirements. We've adjusted the grading criteria for simulations. And I mean, that's the really high level down and dirty on it.
So that first question, what about the CPCs that are training every day? What about their training, their proficiency actually? Is it the same thing? What are we doing to make sure that, certainly you can learn while you train somebody else, but are they getting proficiency time? What is the challenge around that, and what are you doing?
So it seems like, several months ago we had a lot more issues with maybe some of the developmentals not getting all their D-side currency, or some of the CPCs not getting, time on one or two of the sectors. Now we have come up with a process where we have a time period out where we're looking at currency dashboard and stuff and seeing where everybody is. If somebody's far away, we make sure that that person knows and the supervisor knows, hey, this person, needs to get their time and stuff for the month, ensure that they get it.
It's all about orchestrating the need, right? So if you're going to have CPCs that handle the majority, as OJTIs, handle the majority of the people within the area, and you need to take that into consideration when it comes to getting them their pro time. So it's just another thing to add to our list that we have to discuss and make sure that the message is crystal clear as to how we want to handle that internally. But it has to be part of the discussion.
One of the other things, you just brought up the OJTIs, also getting enough OJTIs, getting them trained, when somebody's eligible to become an OJTI and stuff, are they ready? I have my area reps and whoever their OMIC is of the area, they recommend that person, to go do an OJTI, and we get them trained. We have the maximum amount of OJTIs in our building that we could ever possibly have at any one time, because we're constantly doing OJTI training, because you don't want to burn out everybody either, right? You don't want to just hit on 2 or 3 people all the time doing most of the training. You want to try to spread it out.
And in our facility, it comes down to strategically placing those training opportunities also. We from Memorial Day to Labor Day, we're pretty much busy with the training side, the safety side, and the swap side. So when you get into the off season, that's what we refer to it as. You really have to take advantage of those opportunities and make sure you're scheduled, make sure you're staying ahead of the game.
And that question also focused on CPCs getting their training requirements done outside the operation. And that's for anything, whether it's recurrent training, safe discussions, getting people out of the operation is always more challenging. How are we prioritizing that? in the facilities. And I'm sure it's a little bit different in en route facilities than it is in the smaller facilities, especially the OJTIs that are constantly training in those small.
So I think it's always a challenge to get your pro time. It's a challenge for supervisors to get their pro time. But when you start certifying people, you'll have more people on position, and you'll be able to get your ELMs done, or you'll be able to get your pro time. You won't be training as much anymore. So the problem really is in the solution's really in the problem. You know, you just have to try and find a balance, try and get the pro time that you need, but get people certified so that they can back you up and help you out and make the team stronger.
Yeah, the answer to our staffing issue is the 3,800 CPCITs and developmentals we have in the system, right? How to get them trained and certified, or, you know, the other way, if they're not going to be successful to a facility where they might be able to certify.
Exactly.
So our next top question is along those lines. How do you prioritize all of these elements, right? Who gets the training? You have new supervisors, you have people transferring, and you have brand new developmentals. How does that occur in our field facilities, or how should it be occurring around prioritization?
I'm going to be totally honest that we don't normally have a whole lot of prioritization issues in our building with getting somebody trained. You know, we try to, you know, mix up the sectors that somebody's training on, so not everybody's training on one sector, assigning them to the areas, you know, like, I mean, we talked about schedules before, but just assigning the new folks to the areas and stuff where they can get trained. You know, if later on we got to come back and do an Article 46 or whatever whatever might happen that one area is shorter than another, it's getting those people assigned to an area that they can actually get trained. You know, I don't know what Carl can add to that, but it's, you know, that's just not an issue in our building because of all the other things that we do for the most part.
So you guys have helped orchestrate a landscape that allows for easier prioritization, deconflicted things from the facility level.
Yeah,
You do, and it actually comes down to communicating that you need to think outside of the box. Just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean there's not an opportunity we're missing in doing it that way. So whether it's a supervisor that needs time in training or whether it's a new controller, we just need to think outside of the box as to how we are performing our normal everyday operations. Because there are opportunities that are there, but not if we continue to operate the way we've always operated.
We stage 3 and 4 training, and I know in the en route, you know, it's unique in the en route, but stage 3 and 4 training also, there's times where we have, you know, 12 D sides waiting for stage 3 and maybe one R side. So sometimes we do back-to-back D side training, you know, or stage 3 training as opposed to doing a D and R training. But, you know, as soon as we get a couple people ready for the R side training on stage 4, we get a class in there. So usually nobody's waiting more than a few weeks to go up the stage.
We have an outstanding contract team, contact instructors, I believe, that are all retired out of the building. Makes life a little easier. Very motivated SAIC team, as well as our support specialists of training that make all of that happen. The schedule back in 2018, we streamlined that based on the requirements. It had grown, our training program had grown to a 13-week stage delivery. And it grew out of caring. It grew out of people wanting to give more and more and more to these developmentals, but it actually grew beyond what we needed based on the influx of individuals that we had coming. So collaboratively, they went and they decreased that down to the required elements and then a few extra things, brought it down to a 6-week delivery. And now that six-week delivery, the throughput it doubled the first year. And then there was some other creative ideas with schedules and things of that nature. But you just have to think outside of the box, whether it's in the stage training or in the OJT. Continuing to do ops normal when we have 3,800 trainees in our facility, we had as many as 125 and we still have 108. So you have to take different ways, different approaches in order to solve that problem. And the collaborative discussion is where you start.
I think you hit on something there with scheduling. Is it creative scheduling? Are you finding out where the traffic is, putting maybe the best potential trainee in that slot on those days off to get that to maximize that training so they can get done faster? Or
Well, it's like Jeffrey said earlier, there's an opportunity. You have different level developmentals, you have different
right.
limitations on people based on where they're at in training. You have to take advantage of those opportunities, and it is a matter of finding the right fit for each individual, making sure, and then hitting the ATO training initiatives.
But I think something that you talked about communication. I kept hearing that over and over and over, because we know every facility is going to be different, every area is going to be different. You're going to have different needs, going to have different priorities, and that's where it goes back to the communication of the FAC rep, the ATM, setting those expectations. It won't be the same from week to week. It depends on what your facility needs at that time as to what the priority is.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. When Glen signs that training order, and I know it's planned to go out sometime either late this week or early next week, you're going to see that. The discussions are going to happen. It's built into the order that way. So I think that communication, that the work group put it that way to try to encourage that team approach and making sure that we're addressing, the training need at each facility.
So this initiative's been out a while. This number one question here, have we seen an increase in certifications and training hours? What's the data showing us now?
So I haven't seen any data yet on the certification. We rolled the training initiative out in July. I do have some information or some data on the amount of training hours. Across the country, training is actually up 25%. For the national target, we're hitting right below 85% of hitting what the target hours were. That was if every developmental in the country was getting between a 12 to 15 or 15 to 18. We're hitting right below 85% right now. What I would like to see across the board is 90%, as that's what I've been communicating. If we can get there, as training is that important for us. I know we can't hit 100%. I know that's impossible, but I think 90% is within our reach, and so that's what I've been shooting for. Just to give you a couple of more statistics on that, there's just this past week there was 8 facilities across the country that exceeded the goal that were above 90%. Actually, we had 8 facilities above 90%, and we actually had the Indy Memphis that hit 102%.
So I'm going to throw one little thing in here. Maybe it might be for Tim to answer. I think there's been an improvement, but I just want to look at this small group and talk about this. This is the experienced hires and their placement in the facilities. The first year we hired them in 2015, 2014, whatever year it was, it blurs together, they struggled. We saw a lot of them not certify. There has been an improvement on where they're placed. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because to me, it seems like there's a great opportunity for success if we're really, really profoundly thoughtful about placing them in a facility where they can certify. And are we focusing on that? Now, NATCA's not involved in the placement of those individuals, but certainly we wouldn't mind giving our opinion like I just did. So if we can talk about that just a brief bit.
All right.
So let me tee that up. First of all, it was a welcome relief to be able to get our previous experienced folks in and give them an opportunity in this career field. It's a great shot in the arm, whether whether we've got a backlog at the academy and we only have so much throughput that we can do, and then we have the on-again, off-again hiring challenges that we experience in our funding situation. So getting that type of experience and getting that opportunity is fantastic. We want veterans and those with experience to have every opportunity to enjoy this career field. One of the challenges is in how they describe their experience and then being able to interpret that. And this isn't new to us. We did this I did this in the 90s when I was doing hiring in the regional office. You really need a team that understands what they're writing and can translate that to our experience. We also need our folks to be honest about their experience. I'll put that right out there. We've had some folks elaborate. They looked at a radar, so they have radar experience, right? And they might have been putting airplanes together, or they may have just been monitoring for intruders, not actually controlling traffic. But once they're in and they've stated that experience, we've got to find the right place to place them. I know Jeffrey has worked closely with the folks in management services. Glen had done the same before that to try to improve that process, and we have made some improvements. When we identify there's gaps, I know managers are making requests up. I know there are collaborative discussions occurring locally, but that's again where we expect the local team to try to identify or frame the issue. They've got to help us understand what does the individual need, what was their experience, did we place them right? We've made mistakes or oversight, and again, individuals have made mistakes in how they represented their experience. So however we can work together to build that picture and set those individuals up for success, we're willing to do that, and I know that we talk about that constantly. But Jeffrey or Glenn, did you have anything you want to add?
Absolutely, Tim. We just said, you're right, mistakes have been made. I think just this year alone, we had a list of about 30 people. How it happened, we're not necessarily trying to assign blame, that maybe were in a tower facility and had never worked in a tower. We had people in a tower facility that had never worked in a radar room. And the general consensus out there in the field was, if you are a previous experienced person, you don't get to go to Oklahoma City. You know, whatever training you're gonna get right there in the facility. Well, that's not 100% true. We did make some exceptions to that, and for that list of 30 people that were somewhat misplaced, I think we got all 30 of those people the class that they needed. And we're certainly willing, as we move forward, if those types of mistakes happen, then we're gonna go back and do the right thing.
So I would add this. When you see that happen at your facility, obviously try to work it collaboratively with your collaborative partner. But if you can't resolve the issue, push it up to your RVP. Because there have been a couple of instances where we haven't been able to resolve those at the local level or in the district, and it has required elevation up to the national level to get those issues. But certainly it has improved over what happened in 2014 and 2015.
Okay, great. One more question before we end with the video, maybe two. You mentioned, Brian, when you guys were talking about your challenges in training and staying on top of not just where your trainees are today, but their next stage of training. A while back, we used to have quite a big issue around getting people to RTF in Oklahoma City, so there was a backlog there. Are we staying in front of that nationwide, or are we still struggling with getting people into RTF so that they can get back and train back at their facilities? Is that all being worked well?
So I know we're trying to work it. We're trying to get a work group together to address the flow of how people get in and out of that, so that we can make sure that no one's waiting for an extended period of time. I think it's the time has gone up slightly to get into RTF, but as a general rule, it's not a lengthy period of time. But we're definitely working on way when we get INSEP, we're going to try to work with the INSEP group to try to find a way to make sure that we have minimal amount of time when somebody leaves a facility, they have the opportunity to almost immediately go into RTF. So we're working on a workflow process to try to refine the way that we send people to RTF.
So we did sit down with Jeffrey, and obviously understanding the training initiative, we did sit down with the Academy. We do not show any backlog for RTF, so certainly for anyone that thinks they are waiting, we'd sure like to know that, because I think we've gone through to scrub that. We do think we have enough classes scheduled for fiscal year 20 to handle any demand as well. And we also are wanting to sit down and take a look at, with RTF, TSU, and potentially Tetra, is that going to end up causing a traffic jam of everybody trying to rotate back through, trying to get the course they need? So we're going to take a look at those three courses to make sure we're giving the people coming to your facility the right training that they need, but we don't want to get in an endless cycle of having to circle them through the Academy. We know from the tech ops side that's a bad place to be when they have to keep coming back to the Academy and keep coming back to the Academy. So hopefully we'll get that worked through, but we should have enough classes to get everyone through RTF.
So that was one of my goals when I was meeting with Glen and we were looking at where we were going for next year. That was one of the top priorities for me, was to ensure that no one had to wait. I know a lot of times when people check out in the tower, sometimes in the facility, we let them sit a while, and we call it seasoning or whatever before we send them out to Oklahoma City to go to RTF and start radar training, and the same thing. But what I wanted to happen was when someone checks out in the tower, a week or 2 weeks later, we've got a class available that they can get to RTF and get to Oklahoma City. Or if they're if they started in the radar room, they can get down to Oklahoma City and get a tower class, that no one has to wait. That's our goal.
Yep.
So we didn't get to all the questions, and there's some good ones. So let's, real quickly, ATMs and OMs required to take recurrent training. How come and why not? Real quickly. Our controllers take it.
It's certainly something that we can look at.
That's easy.
Okay, no, we don't need an answer. Let's just think about let's just think about that. So there's a couple other really great ones in there. Scrutiny on impediments on the training initiatives. Real quickly, what are we gonna hold people accountable if they're listing all these impediments and they actually?
So here's how the impediments will work. I mean, first of all, I expect it to be screened at the facility level by the ATM. Then I expect it to be screened at the GM level, and that's going to that'll be the FAC rep and the ATM. At the GM level, I'm expecting to be screened by the RVP, the ARVP and the GM. I'm expecting to get screened again by the DO and the RVP. And then lastly, I'll have a discussion with the DOs on Monday about it, and I'll also share that discussion with D. So they will be screened very heavily. We will not let people make excuses not to train. If they're legit, they're legit.
Tim, any last thing before we go to the video?
No, I think we can't stress enough the importance of communication. You heard that throughout the panel, and that's at every level. I can tell you that Jeffrey and Glen brief us, Terry and I, every day on the training results that you had the day before. We are seeing the numbers move in the right direction, and we don't want anybody to think that we have the answers at headquarters. The solution is at the facility level. We've done what we can. We've delivered the resources to the facility, as Brian and Carl have talked about. You have the opportunity to make it successful. It's not easy. It's a challenge. We recognize that, but we're there to support you, and we look forward to some significant improvement over the next few months.
Okay, we're going to end with a video. So join me in thanking Tim for moderating this panel with me and our great panelists of experts.
Nice job, guys.
Stage right, if you're, well.